Everyone at Beyond the Billions wishes you a very happy new year. We're still out, but we'll be back soon. In the meantime, you can look at all the breaking news and the real-time billionaire rankings on Forbes.com. In this episode, we chronicled the legendary career of famous investor and billionaire Warren Buffett, who is retiring now. Happy New Year. Welcome to Beyond the Billions. I'm Giacomo Tognini, and joining me today is senior editor Chase Peterson-Withorn. Chase, this is your third time on the show, record, first time in person. We should have made you like a Letterman jacket or something, but you're here today to talk to us about Warren Buffett. How does it feel being here on the show the third time? And have you ever met Warren Buffett before?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll definitely take the Letterman jacket if one ever becomes
We'll
available.
mail it to you when it comes available.
Yeah, perfect. Warren Buffett. So I did meet Warren Buffett many years ago now. He was at a Forbes event, and he was exactly as advertised, I would say. Very friendly guy, very folksy guy, sitting at a table drinking a cherry Coke. So just very on brand for the Warren Buffett the world knows. I think he's exactly as you would imagine.
So we're obviously talking about him this week because he has retired from Berkshire Hathaway. You don't work at Forbes or even sort of read about billionaires or even the economy in the U.S. Without knowing who he is. So, we could talk about him for hours probably, like we could for some of the other, personalities on the billionaires list. But what makes Warren Buffett so special, and how did he, start out, to becoming now one of the wealthiest people in the world, worth more than $100 billion?
Yeah, I think, Warren Buffett is one of, if not the greatest investor of all time. Mm-hmm. So what makes him special is, I think there's a couple things, right? One of them is he is incredibly wise. And
the Oracle of Omaha. Right?
Yeah, the Oracle of Omaha. Yeah. And I think a lot of people look to him for his wisdom. And he's just a genius at, being able to spot good investments and manage them well. And he's done that over many decades. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is, he's people want to hear from him. Mm-hmm. He's a great speaker. He has interesting things to say on topics, and he's built this sort of cult following. And I don't know how intentionally, but certainly this cult following has grown up around him, mm-hmm. To where he's sort of this larger than life persona, and of course, he's had larger than life success, mm-hmm. and he has larger than life wealth. This is a guy who's worth, something like $150 billion. He's one of the 10 or 15 richest people in the world, and that's after he's given more than $65 billion away to charity. So he could be a lot richer, if he wanted to be. So it makes sense that he's sort of larger than life.
It's funny you mentioned that because there was an investor I talked to a couple years ago. I went to his house in LA, and he's a huge Buffett super fan. He gotten into investing thanks to Buffett, but become relatively wealthy. And he had a signed letter from Warren Buffett, and then he had plushies of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger.
Oh wow!
His obviously partner at Berkshire Hathaway, and I don't know of any other sort of billionaire or investor that draws that kind of passion.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, Buffett has attended many Forbes events. Mm-hmm. I've been at some of them, and
Forbes Philanthropy Summit, right?
Yeah,
which we'll get to later.
Yeah, and it's a room full of billionaires, right? Everybody in the room is used to usually being the most important person, mm-hmm. in the room, right? And when Warren Buffett walks into that room, all the attention goes to him. Mm-hmm. Everybody, I mean, it's crazy how magnetic, he is in that sense, and just he's your favorite billionaire's favorite billionaire, right?
Yeah. So walk us through his life. So how did he get started? Where did he grow up, and how did he get to where he is today?
Yeah, so Buffett lives now in Omaha, Nebraska. Mm-hmm. He grew up in Nebraska, and then he spent some time growing up in D.C. His father was a congressman for a while, and he was just one of those very precocious children. He had a nose for business at a young age. He bought his first stock at age 11, which he's talked about, quite a bit. I lost money on it,
mm-hmm.
but
and that would have been in the 30s, 40s.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And then he had all these businesses growing up. He rented pinball machines, I think something like that. He was just somebody who always had sort of a business venture going, always was learning to make money, always was tracking his money, and just had such a keen sense of it. So I think he was a kid that he didn't necessarily do super well in school, and he acted out a little bit. He's talked about that. But he was somebody who I think you probably had a sense was always going somewhere, and he always had his eye on what his next deal was. So very precocious kid. Then he studied under Ben Graham, was a very famous investor, and learned a lot about value investing and the idea of finding stocks that are mispriced, stocks that are undervalued.
And Graham considered like the sort of
the father
value
of value investing. Yeah, exactly that. And Buffett had read his book and met him and sort of convinced him to hire him, and he worked for Graham for a little while, and then he ended up going. He was back in Omaha. He managed a bunch of money for friends and family friends and stuff for several years. Did very well, and actually retired. And gave the money back for not very long, and then very famously bought a struggling textile mill named Berkshire Hathaway in 1965, and has grown that from the textile business was not doing well and ended up tanking, but he's used that as his holding company, and he's gone on to buy and make big investments in tons and tons of companies, Dairy Queen, Geico Insurance, and then huge investments in Coca-Cola, Apple stock, just bought a bunch of Alphabet stock. So it's a huge conglomerate now, big insurance company, and is really just one of the largest companies in the world. And also, he says it's sort of like he's built it to be a rock of Gibraltar, right? This idea that it's just a steady business that's always going to make money, and they're also very cautious about keeping a lot of cash on hand, not overextending themselves. Many billions of dollars in cash right now. That they're just like reluctant to invest in because they won't buy something if they think they're not getting a good deal. So it's sort of just this big steady business that he's built for 6 decades plus into one of the great giant companies in the history of the world.
And people often watch Berkshire's move, sort of how much cash it keeps versus investing, just as a kind of marker of where the economy is going to go, right? Like if Buffett's keeping a lot of cash on the sidelines, it kind of makes other people think about their own investments differently. Right?
Yeah, definitely. A famous maxim of his is, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. And the idea of, he'll step in to buy stock, he'll buy the dip, you know. And during the financial crisis, he stepped in to, turn some companies around, made some investments that he did well on that also helped, bolster those companies. So, people look to Buffett to see, what he's doing. And also, when he talks very, very frequently, he's spoken in, at conferences, at the annual shareholder meeting, in letters to his shareholders, and he'll talk about whether he thinks asset prices are too high, or now is a good time to buy, now is not a good time to buy. He's definitely one of the great barometers, I guess, that people look to.
Yeah, and those annual shareholder meetings, the shareholders have become sort of must do events, right, for a lot of people. So,
yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the changes that that we're going to see now as he retires and steps back, is that he said that he's not going to be the one up on stage, giving his wisdom at the annual shareholder meetings. He's not going to write his annual shareholder letter anymore. He said he'll write a letter around Thanksgiving, talking about philanthropy, talking about what's going on, but generally speaking, he's sort of handing the reins over. So it's really an end of an era that's lasted a very long time.
So moving on to his philanthropy, was Warren Buffett ever the richest person in the world? And when did he start giving his money away?
Yeah, he was. So, Buffett has talked about how his net worth, if you were to look at it on a stock chart, it barely moves for many, many years, and then all of a sudden, it takes off. And, he's been very vocal about the impact of compound interest, right. And just that's he's talked about his whole wealth is owed to, some lucky genes, being born at the right time, being born in the right place, having some special skills, I suppose, but also compound interest is like the big key ingredient, right? So So, he was wealthy for a long time, but became enormously wealthy, in recent decades, as his investments have compounded. And he was the richest person in the world, he did, for a couple of years during the financial crisis, maybe before that too. He's always been in the mix. He's been in the top, 5 for a really long time, top 3, top 2, in America for a really long time too, until recent years. And the reason he's sort of tailed off more than anything else is because he's given so much money away to charity. I mean, he's probably the greatest philanthropist in the history of the world. Certainly the greatest philanthropist in modern times. I mean, you could debate whether, somebody giving a big portion of their wealth back in hundreds of years ago is more impactful or not. I don't know. But in the modern era, nobody's given more money away than Warren Buffett. And yet he's still worth, $150 billion. So, it's really mind-boggling.
And he initially started giving away, and it gave away a lot of his money through the what was at the time Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, now the Gates Foundation. Tell us a little bit more about that and sort of how that relationship started.
Yeah, so he became friends with Bill Gates a long time ago. They sort of hit it off, and as Gates stepped more into philanthropy, Buffett also was thinking a lot more about philanthropy, and I think he came to this conclusion that he's spoken about that, he's an expert at finding mispriced assets in the financial markets. He's not an expert at how to give money away. Yeah. And so his thought was, he wanted to give money away now rather than only when he dies, under the theory that, yes, for a long time he thought, if I just hold on to this money and I make more money with my money, I'll have more money to give away. And I think he came to this realization that, yes, your money will compound, but so too will the problems of the world.
Yeah.
And so, if you give some of your money away now, you can make a bigger impact than later. So he started to give more money away faster. And I think his other realization was, I'm not an expert in this field. And so he thought, I should give money to the people who are experts. Yeah. And so, Bill Gates was somebody who he trusted, who he thought ran a good operation. And so he said, I'm going to give much of my wealth away to charity. I'm going to start giving it away now. And this was, 20, 25 years ago now, 20 years ago. And I'm going to give a lot of it to the Gates Foundation because I trust them to do smart things with it. But then at the same time as doing that, he also was giving a lot of money away to a few foundations run by his children. And there's a foundation that he had started with his late wife, who also, that foundation also started to get a lot of Buffett money. And then in recent years, what he's done is he started to, give more to those 4 foundations, his 3 children and the one named for his late wife. And he said that when he dies, he's actually going to give them, most of the money and not so much give money to the Gates Foundation. So there's been a little bit of a shift there. But from the jump, he's basically been giving to these, the vast majority he's been giving to these just 5.
And it was with Bill Gates that they came up with the Giving Pledge, right? Which was this pledge to have wealthy people give away more than half of their net worth before they died, which, we've been tracking this for a while. Some people have died and have not reached that goal. It's kind of a mixed bag, but how important do you think is the legacy of that project and sort of his relationship with Gates, which I guess in recent years has sort of lessened a little bit, right? At least with the giving, right?
Yeah, seems like it. But, the Giving Pledge, it's hard to tell what the impact is now.
Yeah.
So many people who have signed it, have not passed away or haven't given the money away
and
yet.
Some it's just because their wealth has grown too fast.
Yeah.
Others just haven't done that much, right? It's
exactly. So, it will be interesting to see, how many people really do fulfill it.
Yeah.
It's a pledge, but it's a promise, but it's not legally binding,
yeah.
or anything like that. But even if some people don't, I think it's clear that a lot of people who maybe otherwise weren't going to give a lot of money away will. Yeah. So I think in sheer dollar terms, I mean, it's definitely going to be, a big benefit. And obviously, Buffett and Gates alone just giving 99% of their fortune away is
huge.
That alone is just, a tremendous amount of money. But they've definitely inspired a lot of others to do the same. And I think they've seen themselves as maybe a force multiplier where, in the past, their inspiration, one of their inspirations was this guy Chuck Feeney, who was a billionaire who very quietly gave away something like $8 billion, never talked about it or anything like that. And I think the realization that they've come to is maybe we should talk about this a little bit because you can influence other people to do the same thing.
Right. And so now that we're coming to the end of his career at Berkshire Hathaway, I think he's around 95 years old, Who's going to be a successor, and what do we know about them?
Yeah, so this guy Greg Abel is taking over. He's been with Berkshire for a couple decades now, basically running the like non-insurance part of Berkshire in recent years. He came to Berkshire when Berkshire acquired an energy company that he was involved with. So he's been groomed for a long time to take over this role. Buffett has spoken about succession for a long time. He's 95, and people have been talking about this for a lot longer than the last couple of years. And so he's been very intentional about who will take over when, what the plan is, and there's always sort of been a plan. And I think that he's said that now's the time for him to step back. He's fully confident that Greg is going to be able to take over and do well, and that Berkshire shareholders will be in good hands. So I think it's just one of those examples of you get these billionaires sometimes who, I don't know if they think they're never going to die, but they don't want to think about the fact that they're going to die.
Yeah, they don't have a succession plan in place.
Yeah, and Warren Buffett is definitely not that. He's somebody who's thought about it a lot from a corporate perspective, but also in a personal perspective too. He's talked a lot about the idea that his children have read his will. They know what's coming, and they've had a chance to discuss it, and there won't be any surprises, and so he's thought about this stuff a lot. So whether it works out or not, that's you can't predict the future, but he's definitely thought about how do we put ourselves in the best position, at least when this happens.
Do you think his succession plans were at all changed by the passing of Charlie Munger in the last couple of years, and sort of how their relationship was?
I don't know. I wouldn't think so, because I think they've thought about it so long, and Charlie was even older than Buffett, so I'm sure Charlie wasn't going to be the successor in any way.
And obviously they worked together for decades, right? So it would have also had time to plan things together.
Yeah, I think so. But I wouldn't. I do wonder if Buffett has changed his own personal plans, because of it. I don't know. He went on a couple of years without Charlie, but had to feel a little bit weird and different for him to be up there, at the annual shareholders meeting on the stage, cracking jokes and, doling out wisdom without, Munger there, who's there for so long. So I wonder at a certain point if Buffett, says like, okay, my era is over.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that people always talk about with Warren Buffett is sort of his personal quirks, right? He has had the same house in Omaha for the longest time. He doesn't have like a flashy real estate empire around the world or yachts. What are some of the personal quirks that you like about him and his fortune from covering him?
Yeah, I think he's famously very frugal. There's a great documentary where he's taking the camera crew on his commute to work, which is like a few miles down the road, and he stops at McDonald's, and he said he's paying with exact change, and he's saying that his wife gives him a cup with the exact amount of change, for his $3.19 or whatever, like sausage egg McMuffin.
No more pennies now. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. He might actually have to swipe a card.
Yeah.
I'm sure that he wouldn't. But he's joking about the stock market's down today, so I'm going to get the cheaper. And he knows like the price of a sausage egg McMuffin versus a bacon, egg, and cheese bagel or whatever. It's like 20 cents cheaper or something. And he's really thinking about that. And so I think that. People take to that stuff because he seems like sort of a regular guy, as regular of a guy as you can be if you're like a financial genius and also one of the richest people in the world. But he's really like, he's very famous for being frugal. He's very famous for, he always says he eats like a child. He's a burger and fries guy. He's a meat and potato guy, not really a fancy food guy. So I think, he's preaching this, value investing, buy good companies at fair prices for the long haul. And don't try to, time the market or do anything flashy. And he's also living that in a sense, because he's, living like a normal person. And so I think that, it's given him a lot of credibility and of course his track record. But, it's all given him a lot of credibility where people want to hear what he has to say because he lives like a regular guy and, has advice for regular people. Whereas, a lot of, billionaires at that level maybe don't, relate to the average person.
Right, and it's sort of hard to talk to them sometimes.
Yeah, you're living in a totally different world. Whereas Buffett is like driving an old, Cadillac 5 miles and getting some McDonald's, every morning, and then going home and having like a Coke and and a burger, and not really doesn't have a yacht. It came out that he had like bought a modest beach house that and he had it for many years. And when he went to sell it, it had come out, and it was like shocking that he even had this like second small family vacation home. It was like a few bedrooms or something. I don't think it was even on the water.
Doesn't he have a famous quote about he had a private jet for a bit because it like made business sense, but he hated the fact that he bought it. Right?
Yeah, the nickname he had for it was the indefensible.
Yeah.
It's I can't justify having this. I know I shouldn't have this, but it makes so much sense. And so of course now he's got a different thing, which is that his company owns NetJets. So
exactly.
so he's you're not going to catch Warren Buffett on a commercial flight.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the more fascinating people we cover here at Forbes, and it'll be really interesting to see how he gets into his retirement. But Chase, it's been so great having you on today to dig into Warren Buffett, and we'll have to see how he gets on in his retirement.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You can find Chase's stories and the other stories from today's episode in the show notes.